name is Miranda Martin, and I am doing this show from Huntsville, Alabama, and we have with us today astronaut Greg Chamitoff. And before we get into our show, I want to take a moment to thank the One Giant Leap Australia team for helping coordinate this event. They've worked with NASA DLN on coordination with our special guests today and assisting many schools from Australia watching this webcast, and especially Jackie Slavero, who helps coordinate with the schools on all of the technical things as we gathered questions from the students. We met Jackie years ago in one of her many visits here to Space Camp, which is located here in Huntsville, and since then we've connected for many events and certainly appreciate her time and effort with helping making this happen today. So thank you, Jackie. Next, we wanted to thank the many schools that have submitted questions today. Some of the schools include Epping Heights, Barnier Public School from the Australian Catholic Education System, as well as from Randall's Elementary located in Flint, Michigan. So let's begin our program. And the first thing I have is a fun song to help you remember some things about the International Space Station.
Well, here's a few facts about the ISS that 15 countries made a success. Took a lot of space flights for us to build a station as big as a football field. 2 Johns on board, but they got no bath. Orbits the Earth in an hour and a half. Over 200 miles up off the ground, and tipping them scales at 1,000,000 pounds. Making benefits for humanity through new science and technology. Over 200 people have lived on board, the heroes of Earth who were driven to explore space, that is, off the Earth, for the Earth, on the journey to Mars.
All right, very cool. Well, former astronaut Dr. Greg Chamitoff spent some time on the International Space Station, and we want to show you a quick update video of current station activities.
Houston Station on Space to Ground.
Energized. Welcome to Space to Ground. I'm Gary Jordan. It takes a lot of energy every day to be an astronaut, performing complex science experiments and maintenance tasks, working out 2.5 hours, all while on a packed timeline. One study is making sure astronauts have the energy needed to do it all. Takuya Onishi completed the 11-day experiment called Energy this past Sunday. Throughout that time, Onishi was logging his food intake each day while occasionally collecting biological samples and measuring oxygen uptake. The Energy study makes sure that through long stays in space and rigorous exercise, astronauts will have the right amounts of the right types of food for even longer space flights, like on the journey to Mars. Astronauts near the end of their turn conducting the fluid shifts experiment with a round of testing called dilution measures. Kate Rubins and Takuya Onishi began a series of tests for the fluid shifts experiment scheduled during the home stretch of the astronauts' stay on the ISS before returning to Earth. Dilution measures include collecting biological samples, ultrasound scans, eye exams, and more over several days. The ongoing fluid shifts experiment investigates potential causes of pressure in the head and vision changes during long space flights. This week's question comes from JQ, who's asking if there is a plan to add modules to the ISS and achieve a full circle. There used to be plans like this before the station was built, and we've since moved on from those concepts, but that doesn't mean we're done adding modules. Many of NASA's early designs for a space station were full circles. One concept from here at the Johnson Space Center called the racetrack featured parallel modules connected at the ends. Over time, designs and plans changed into what is now the linear layout of the International Space Station, and new elements are still being affixed. This year, Beam was added to test expandable module technology, and the International Docking Adapter was installed for future commercial crew vehicles to dock to. NASA recently announced the opportunity for private companies to add their own modules to the ISS in an effort to expand the commercial space business. Keep sending us your questions using the hashtag #SpaceToGround. We'll see you next week.
Very cool work being done on the space station. Before we meet our special guest, astronaut Chamitoff, I want to tell you a little bit about him. He has multiple degrees in engineering and science. He served as a mission specialist for STS-134. and completed 2 spacewalks on that mission. He also flew on STS-124 and the ISS Expedition 1718. He was a flight engineer and a science officer on that flight. He's logged more than 198 days in space. His hobbies include flying, scuba diving, playing the guitar, and chess. And our producer here has been using videos of him playing chess for many years with his connections with students. And Chamitoff actually played with chess with students while he was on board the ISS. So it's a really neat guy. And let's see if he's here with us now.
Hello.
Good evening. Thank you
Hello.
for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Will you tell us where you're calling from?
Yeah, I'm calling from Austin, Texas, not too far from Houston, where everybody has to do all their training and preparation for space.
Very nice. Well, we have students from around the world watching this today. Is it correct that you have some time in the classroom yourself?
Yeah, in fact, let me just say welcome to everybody who's here today. Everybody from Australia, I'm really glad to be able to see you here today. And also those who are joining from the U.S., it's really great to be able to talk to you today. Also, I want to thank NASA, and also I want to thank One Giant Leap, which is an organization in Australia that's trying to create a space camp for Australia, which is a fantastic thing that I'm really excited about and behind. And also, I just want to thank you guys for having me today. I'm really happy to be here.
Well, it's our pleasure. We appreciate your time. I have some questions here from some students, if you don't mind answering those. The first group is from Barnier Public School, and we have 2 questions that we're combining from Miss Dalton's class. The students want to know what you enjoyed most about being in space and what you liked least about your experience in space.
Sure. I'd like to, maybe I can, say a few words of background before, answering that. I just want to, say that, all the students there that, I kind of grew up, dreaming about going to space, and I know a lot of you have dreams and hopes what you want to do in your life. And I grew up in Canada originally, and you mentioned the last question about teaching. So I spend time in Australia and in the U.S. teaching now, but I grew up in Canada and kind of wanted to do this my whole life as a kid. And through a series of working hard and one step after the other, was able to do it. So maybe some of that some of the steps along the way may come out during some of these questions. But in terms of actually flying in space and what I loved up there, it's an amazing place to be. I mean, the space station is an incredible place. It's hard to get an idea of how big it is without actually seeing it. If you know, like a football field or a soccer field, I mean, you couldn't even put it down on a field that size. It's a really huge facility that we've built, and so just being up there and to see what humanity's been able to create, to see this huge facility that's flying over the Earth, and to look out the window and see the Earth below, it's just an amazing place to be. So I did a lot of that. I spent a lot of time by the window. I spent a lot of time looking at the Earth. I got a chance to do a couple of spacewalks, and being outside on the spacewalk, it's almost like it's right out of a movie. You see it happen in a science fiction movie, and then, one day you're there yourself and you're looking and you see the whole Earth below your feet. That was an incredible experience to do that. But one of the things that I liked the most, really, being on the space station, was every day working with people all around the world. It's not something that I kind of expected there to be a feeling of being out there by yourself, and I was there with just a couple of crewmates most of the time. But all day long, you're working with people all around the world, and you feel like you're doing something that matters, something that contributes to humanity. And having that experience of doing that every day was a really fantastic experience. One of my favorite things being up there, and probably one of the things I missed the most. The thing that was the hardest being up there, that was being away from my family. That's really hard for everybody, because on the space station, you're there for 6 months, and we recently had one crew member up there for a year. And being away from your family for any purpose, for any reason, is hard, and you feel very far away. So that's one of the challenges.
I could definitely see how that would be a challenge. And you kind of touched on this. The students are interested to know what interests you had as a child and if you always did well in school.
Well, yeah, I had a lot of interest in hobbies, as a child. One thing I liked to do, I was in Scouts. I liked to do for Australia, bushwalking, hiking, camping, that sort of thing. And I was into lots of different things like music and magic and juggling and running and a lot of different things. I did well in school, but I wasn't always the top student. And one thing that I think I learned luckily early on is that working hard is just as important as being the best student. And so I think that learning that I had to work hard in order to do really well was an important thing that I learned early on and made it possible for me to eventually to be in space.
Solid words on that. So going back to one of the things that you enjoyed about being on station and viewing the Earth out of those windows and that cupola, will you talk a little bit more about the Earth from ISS and the different kinds of things you could see?
Yeah. I mean, the space station has a lot of windows, which is a great thing. And some of those windows are, if you're looking down and photographing the Earth, and other ones you can see off, at an angle. And that, and also on the space shuttle has kind of a wraparound glass in the cockpit, and you really can get the sense of, flying over the Earth and seeing the Earth below. On the space station, it's a little more like when you're on a commercial airplane, you're looking out of like the window, next to your seat, so kind of like a porthole. So depending which way that window is facing kind of determines what you see. Some of the windows, there's a window in particular that's on the Russian side of the space station that's lower down in a module, so that when you look out of it, you not only see the whole Earth, but you see the space station above you as well. So you can see the spaceship you're on as well as the Earth below, and then the darkness of space in the background. And just seeing the Earth just floating there, I mean, you feel like you're floating, the space station is floating, and then you see the Earth just floating there, and you don't feel like you necessarily going around it. You just see that it's turning, it's turning below you, and just the feeling of the Earth being alone like that, it looks unbelievably huge. It's the biggest thing you've ever seen with your own eyes, but it still looks very much alone. It really gives you an appreciation for how special a place the Earth is. And you can sit by the window all day long. Of course, we don't have any time to do that, but occasionally we have a little bit of time. But you just sit there and you wonder about, how did this come to be? Why is this the way things are? Why is this the way the universe is put together? And what is our place in it? What is our future, going to be? And that this space station you built, and this is kind of the doorstep to what that future is. So it's a very, very special experience that now all I can do is try to share that with everybody. I wish everybody could see that for themselves.
It sounds amazing. I can't even imagine the different things that you would feel being in that position and seeing the Earth so small. And of course, the always popular question, how complicated is the bathroom in space?
Well, maybe the best way to explain this is that, on Earth we use water, right? Water helps us get rid of everything. In space we can't do that. So in space we use air, right? So so suction is used to get rid of everything. But now we're recycling a lot of things, right? And if you saw like the movie The Martian, we're not quite growing potatoes with it all just yet, but that's coming eventually. But right now we actually recycle all the urine, so there's a couple of different contraptions and attachments, for girls and for boys, and the tricky thing is you have to do number 1 and number 2 separate. So that's something that takes a little practice. But air suction basically takes it all the way. But the recycling is a really important thing, because when I was on the space station, we were not able to recycle urine. And during my long duration flight, the shuttle that picked me up brought up the new equipment to recycle urine for the first time. So there's a picture that we have where we have two water containers. One says today's coffee, one says yesterday's coffee, and the idea being that, well, they're the same. And now we can do that. Now we can recycle all the water, and that's going to be a really important thing for us to be able to leave Earth and go to Mars and go to the moon and go to other places and explore the solar system. We have to recycle. Just like the Earth is always recycling everything, we just have to recycle on a smaller scale. But it takes a lot of technology to do that. And
right.
So, anyway, that's roughly how it works.
So we have a video that Sunny Williams made during her time on station, and if you like, we can show it to the students.
Okay.
Okay, we'll go ahead and cue that up.
One of the most pressing questions about living in space, of course, is the bathroom. So let's take a look at that little piece of work. Come on in. And of course, it serves for two functions. Number 2, right here. I'll show you. But you see it's pretty small, so you have to have pretty good aim, and you be ready to make sure things get let go the right direction. And it smells a little bit, so I'm closing it up. And that's, of course, for number 2. And this guy right here is for number 1. So they're sort of two slightly separate functions, but you can do essentially both by hanging on right here and doing number 1 and number 2. I might add it's color coded, so you really don't get it mixed up, which is nice. This is yellows for number 1.
I can't imagine the challenges of using that restroom.
It's all worth it.
All right, our next set of questions are from Randall's Elementary in Flint, Michigan. So if an astronaut floated away on a spacewalk, which I know you did spacewalks, how would they be saved?
So yeah, that's a good question. So if you were doing a spacewalk when we had a space shuttle, the space shuttle can fly around, right? So if you flew away and got detached somehow, the space shuttle can, in a sense, fly and come and get you. Space station can't do that. It's like a building in space. It can't do that. So we were very, very careful. We don't want to fall off the space station when we're doing a spacewalk. And because of that, we're using tethers all the time. So we have like a reel with a wire tether, and that goes all the way back to when we came out of the airlock. And if you have to go really far out on the space station, you actually may have to switch them and switch to another tether and carry one with us. We also use hooks, basically like rock climbing, to hold us where we are when we're working. And so we want to make sure that we don't fall off, because if we fell off, we would be fired. That's one way to lose your job. But if you do fall off, we have something called SAFER. It stands for Simplified Aid for EVA Rescue, which is basically like a jetpack. So we played around with jetpacks many years ago. Kind of like the jetpacks you kind of see in movies. And this is pretty cool. It's built into this suit. You basically reach behind you and you pull up a little lever back here, and a hand controller pops out. And let's say you're tumbling and falling away from the space station. You push a button and basically it would stop the tumbling. There's thrusters all over. It's attached to your whole spacesuit, and there's thrusters on it that will fire and stop you from tumbling. And then you can control yourself. You basically have a joystick. You can control your motion, forward, backward, left, and right, and you can control your orientation. So you have to orient yourself to point back at the space station, and then you try to go that way. You try to get back. You don't have a lot of fuel though, and you have to get back and grab on before you miss. And you got to be really careful not to miss, because it turns out in space when there's two bodies in orbit, there's the motion between them is not the way. Doesn't behave the way you would normally expect. So actually, if you push really hard to move towards something and it's in front of you, you may go up and fall behind eventually. So you have to be really careful. You have to make small adjustments and then recorrect and make small adjustments, because otherwise you may find yourself following a path you don't expect, and you may not have enough fuel to come back. So it's something we practice. This is really fun actually, because we do this we have a virtual reality simulator. We have lots of training tools for lots of things. Obviously, for spacewalks, we do most of our training underwater. But this we train in a virtual reality environment. So we put on goggles, You have gloves that can tell what your hands are doing, and you can see the whole space station and the Earth and everything around you, and you can practice doing this, rescuing yourself. But then when you got back, you'd be fired.
Yeah.
That's something you're not supposed to let happen.
Well, the virtual reality training definitely sounds like a lot of fun. So we know that you have multiple degrees. You were in the astronaut class of '98, but how long does a person have to study to be an astronaut, and is there an age requirement for space travel?
So there's not really an age requirement. There is a health requirement. When I got selected, I was 35. Most people, that's pretty much the average age. Most people have been through school, been through university, and have had some time to get work experience. That's hopefully relevant to, to some aspects of the job. Because the job involves, lots of different things, from science to engineering to flying and lots of different skills. But then once you're selected, you have a lot of training to do. So for me, it was about 10 years from when I was selected until my first flight. Part of that, during that time, we had the Columbia accident. So that was a period of time when everyone in my class, kind of had to work through that, which was a bad time for NASA, but a great time when we, were able to recover and start flying the space shuttle again. But yeah, it's a lot of training. So it was training for at least a year. For our class, it was 2 years just to be, to go from a candidate, we call it astronaut candidate, ASCAN, to go from being an ASCAN to a real astronaut. That takes a couple of years. And then after that point, then you have special skills you have to learn, and you work in support of all the other missions and all the other astronauts until, it's finally your turn, and then you can start training for your mission, and that takes another, several years. And then it depends exactly what you're going to do. If it was a short flight, it could happen, with a year or two. If it was a long duration flight, it could be quite a bit longer than that. There's a lot to know about how to work everything on the space station. With 16 different countries and all these modules from different countries, every module's got its own science program and its own equipment, and you have to learn, how to use everything. So it takes a lot of time, many, many years of training, and some of it in different languages. In our case, usually Russian, but in different countries, in Canada, and Japan, and Russia, and Europe, a lot of different training around the world before you get there.
So they really want to make sure you know what you're doing before they send you up. That's a solid plan. So we know that you spent some time on the space station. How many people can live on the space station at one time?
The space station was built to be able to handle 7 people at a time, continuously. And the real requirement for us is to have rescue vehicles that can take everybody, safely to the ground in an emergency. So right now, we generally have 2 Soyuz capsules on the space station. We have Russian Soyuz capsules, which each could take 3. And so right now we can operate with a crew of 6. When I was there, we only had 1 Soyuz at a time. We could have a crew of 3. But the space station is a big place, and with 3 people, think of it as like 12 or 14 bus size, school bus size modules. So there's a lot of places you can go and be working. And so with 3 people, you might not even see each other all day unless you purposely went and grabbed somebody to say, hey, let's go have lunch. But with a space shuttle attached, we can have at times we had 13 people up there. So 6 living on the space station, 7 from the shuttle, and for a 2-week period, you have 13 people, working up there. And so that was very possible with the space shuttle attached and its systems. We could have up to 13 people at the same time. So actually, it was about 30 people. With my 2 missions, I've seen about 30 people in space. So a lot of people coming and going, actually.
Absolutely. And with these people who are spending time on the International Space Station, what are some biological effects?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and it's a really important question, because for us to be able to go beyond low Earth orbit and to be able to go to Mars and the Moon and to live, on other planets or other space stations, we need to be able to figure out and overcome, these biological effects. You probably know that, being in zero gravity has an effect on your muscle mass and your bone mass, and this is something that we're working to understand and overcome. Some of it has to do with exercise, some of it has to do with impact on the bone, some of it has to do with nutrition. And so we have lots of studies that we've been doing throughout the whole space station program, long-term studies with lots of people now to understand those effects and try to figure out what are the countermeasures to this for living in zero gravity. Radiation is also a really big factor. In low Earth orbit, where the space station flies, we're protected to a large extent from the Earth's magnetic field. But if we want to go to Mars, we have to leave that cocoon that kind of surrounds the Earth. It's still not small in the space station. You can't live in the space station. A person couldn't live there forever without having significant enough radiation that it raises their risk of getting cancer significantly. But for 2 or 3 years, it's okay, roughly speaking, for a person, depending on their age and sex and so on. But to go to Mars, it's going to be much more, the radiation dosage is much, much higher than your free space. It'll be higher on Mars itself. And so we have to figure out, how to mitigate this. It's one of the challenges that we have, because radiation really does affect our cell structure, our DNA, and it's a definite challenge. But blocking it with material is one thing you can do, and one of the best solutions is probably surrounding yourself as much as possible with water. A couple of meters of water between you and the rest of space is enough to filter out most of the radiation. So if you can build your spacecraft to have most of your water tanks and waste tanks around you, you can get rid of most of that. So it's not an insurmountable problem. It's just a challenging problem. And there are other problems that we've come across. One of them is vision. It's been a recent problem. It's very surprising. And it came up during the time that it wasn't really well understood when I flew, and I became one of the special cases to look at when I came back. But we've had people have vision changes from being in space, and we noticed it in space, and it basically looks like it looks like additional pressure in the back of your eye. It's called papilledema. It kind of looks like a tumor, but it's really not. And we've been trying to understand that, because we don't want astronauts to go to Mars and then when they get there, some of them are blind or can't get back, because some of them get blind on the way back. We don't know how much it progresses over time. But we just had someone on space station for a year, and there was not a problem with that. And we have a lot of equipment now to study this and understand it and figure out what's going on there. But that's going to be one of the interesting challenges with just being in zero gravity. If we had artificial gravity, if we spun part of our spacecraft to make artificial gravity, we may be able to get rid of that danger. So there's probably lots of solutions to it. But right now, it's one of the interesting challenges. And of course, coming back to Earth after being in space in zero gravity is challenging for everybody. First coming back to 1G it's overwhelming. Going up is kind of easy. You feel a little bit off or potentially sick for a day, but then you feel great after that. You're like Superman flying around the space station. When you come back, you don't feel like Superman at all. Gravity is really strong, and you have to readapt to it. So, despite all the exercise we do, I think in the video you showed before, I heard them talking about exercise. Doing 2.5 hours of exercise a day, I felt great in space, and right before coming back, I felt really strong and healthy. But when I came back to Earth, boy, was I wrong. It takes a while. It takes about as much time on Earth to get used to being back on Earth as the time that you were away. So I can't imagine if somebody lived in space for years, could they even come back? Could they even come back, and could their heart handle it? Who knows? These are some of the interesting challenges that we have to deal with.
And that's a really good segue into our next section of questions that are combined questions from the Catholic education system and other One Giant Leap schools. Have any of your lifestyle habits changed since spending time on the ISS? Like you mentioned, it's a challenge to readjust to 1G. So have you made any long-term changes in your lifestyle as a result of that?
I think in terms of lifestyle, I think my lifestyle changed when I was a kid, when I thought all of a sudden when the shuttle first flew, when I was basically in my first year of college. I called NASA and asked what it would take, to become an astronaut. And I think all my lifestyle changes changed then in terms of, staying fit and healthy and eating well. And so I think, those kind of changes really didn't change after coming back. It changed, kind of as part of my my own personal, effort to make it possible to somehow go. I think that, I do try to spend a lot of time now doing things like this, like trying to share the experience and inspire kids. I mean, I think that's it's really important as a personal purpose. Going to space was a fantastic experience, and it was a personal goal. But as a life purpose now, I think I have to share it with the rest of humanity and try to inspire others to do the same and to take it further. So I think that's one thing, and the other, I think, is also just appreciating the Earth and each other. Taking care of our own planet, taking care of our. We're the only species that can take care of this planet, and the future of our species depends on us. And I think trying to keep pushing that message and making sure that we don't get derailed with the wrong ideas and with conflicts that aren't necessary or that are really taking us the wrong direction as a species. We have so much hope and promise, as a species that could move outward and expand out into the universe. And we're at this pivotal point where we can do this now. We're already there. We're there all the time. It was a magic kind of date to me, the year 2000, when where suddenly we had people on the space station, and from that point forward, we were always going to have people in space. So that was a magical point in time, the year 2000. After which, hopefully from then on, we're always a space-faring civilization. And so, wanting to keep that momentum going, that's a really important thing. So I think in terms of things I do, I think these are some of the things that that I focus on now. But so it's not so much the habits, I think, that have changed, but maybe just the perspective, that has changed, and what I think is important that has changed.
Right, and along the lines of you giving back and doing activities with students, we certainly appreciate your time this evening. So thank you so much for answering these questions for us. So space seems so far away. How long does it take to travel to space and to make it to the International Space Station?
Yeah, it's a good question, because it's not very far away at all. It's, when we look up from here, it looks like we're looking off into infinity. And when you're in space and you look down on the Earth, the interesting thing is that because, there's vacuum between you and most of the atmosphere is the thicker part's pretty far below. You can see really far in a vacuum before it sort of, gets fuzzy. Whereas you're looking through the atmosphere, there's kind of a limit to how far you can see. When you're flying over the Earth looking down, it doesn't really feel that far at all. But you do see, from horizon to horizon, you see the ball of the Earth. It's, when you launch, it's only a matter of minutes before the blue sky turns black, and then it's just this really, really, it's really strange to see, when you're used to seeing like the blackness in the sky from like an airplane, the Earth is always dark below. But when you see the Earth brightly lit, but yet the sky is really black, that's the view from space, and it only takes a few minutes to get there. It takes 8.5 minutes when you launch to get to the point where you're in orbit. So that's only with. For those of you who've been on one of those rides that spin you around, and you get stuck up against the wall, it's about that much acceleration. It's not much more than that. And in 8.5 minutes of mostly less than that in terms of force on you, you're there, and you're going 28,000 kilometers an hour. And you have that view of the Earth below and the blackness of space. So that's all it takes, to get there. But it's a big machine. You're strapped to a very big bomb that, there's 4.5 million pounds of explosives that it takes to make that happen. So it's pretty exciting ride to get there.
I bet. So you've mentioned the time that you've spent looking out the window into the blackness of space and then back at Earth. We have plans to send humans deeper into space, to Mars and such. So what are your opinions on alien life?
it's really, really hard to imagine, that we're alone. We're certainly far away from, from anything, intelligent. We haven't come across anything intelligent yet, but so the idea that we're going to meet somebody intelligent that's, I kind of jokingly spent my time up there hoping that someone would come knocking on the hatch and I would have to like figure out how to let them in. But like it didn't happen. But we now know that we know of thousands of worlds now around other planets, and and that's just the beginning. That's just the ones that we can measure so far. There's going to be more planets out there, but than stars, and there's hundreds and hundreds of billions of stars, even in a couple hundred in our own galaxy. It's really hard to imagine that for some reason our planet is the only one that has life. Something happened recently that was really kind of pivotal in this. The Rosetta spacecraft, that went out to to rendezvous, basically found that there was amino acids and all the building blocks of life were already out there on a comet. And this is really interesting because if you think that there's something special, on the Earth itself that made it possible for life to come to be, but we found all those building blocks for life on a comet, which is left over from the formation of the whole solar system. Right? It hasn't bumped into anything yet. It hasn't crashed into. We watched the other one, crash into Jupiter. This one hasn't crashed into anything yet. Right? It's been burning up slowly as it orbits the sun. And on that comet, we found the same building blocks for life. So, and there's explanations for why that may be true, but the point being that the building blocks for life are out there. They're just part of nature in space. And so, the chance that they've been able to come together and form life elsewhere, I think, is incredibly high. The only challenge for us is how far it is away to the worlds that we may find it. But I hope we'll find some life in our own solar system, and that will push us to go, even beyond to look for, more intelligent life from the out. Yeah.
So what excites
I don't
you?
expect we're going to be.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I just don't expect we're going to be shaking hands with any aliens too soon, but we can hope.
So what excites you the most about the future of space travel?
Well, I think it's a very exciting time. Right now, NASA is working again to build the capability that we need to be able to go further out in the space station. So the space station was a stepping stone, right? It's stuck in low Earth orbit around the Earth, but it's a place where we can do all our science and we can test out all this technology for recycling and for other systems that we need. But now we're building a rocket that can take us much further. It can take us to the moon, to Mars, to asteroids, and and SpaceX and all these other commercial space companies are now supplying the space station, making it much more cost-effective to launch and get into space. They're going to make it more possible for research and commercial entities to profit from being in space. And once it's profitable, I think there'll be a real boom in space activity. But I always thought it was possible for me to stand on Mars someday. I mean, that's what I dreamed of as a kid, was to stand on the moon or stand on Mars. And in a way, I can't believe that it didn't happen in the time that while I was flying in space. But I haven't given up yet. I think it's still possible. And SpaceX is talking about launching a capsule to Mars every 2 years, starting in 2018. They'll learn how to land there and build up to being able to land a lot of people there. And they just made a very big announcement of a plan of how to start colonizing Mars in the future. So it's very exciting because I think it's the beginning of the next phase of our whole species. I think by the year 3000, Earth will be one of many places where humans live, and we're going to take the life from Earth with us. And so when you say, is there life elsewhere in space? There will be, because we're going to take it from here and we're going to spread it everywhere. And so I think it's a very exciting time. I think it's the most important. There's a lot of things going on in the world, but I think looking back from the year 3000, the most important thing that's happening right now that we're all a part of, that's very exciting, is the beginnings of us, climbing off the Earth into space and exploring and being a species and life on this planet, moving out into the solar system. So this is like, I think this is a pivotal time in history, and I think we're really incredibly lucky to be part of it. None of us, if we were all here 100 years ago, we wouldn't be part of this. And if we're here 500 years from now, we would all be flying around our spaceships and we wouldn't appreciate it. So it's pretty exciting to be the ones making it happen. So I think it's a great time to live, and for the students who are all out there, thinking about the future, it's theirs to create. We've given them the foothold, and you guys, you're the ones who are going to make it possible to do all these things. So, and we'll be watching. We'll be excited for you.
You're exactly right. Going back to your experience on your space flights, did your crew experience any dangerous situations while you were there?
It's funny. It's kind of like like everywhere else, where alarms go off when you don't expect them to, and they're almost always false alarms. We have the same thing happening on the space station a lot of the time. There's nothing like waking up to a fire alarm or an alarm, and then thinking, where am I? Oh, I'm in space. Oh yeah, this is bad. This could be bad. And then you spend the next 10 minutes trying to figure out, is this real or not? And that happened many times. In space, but no, the only real emergency that I had was during a spacewalk, actually, and that's also not a good thing. When you're out doing a spacewalk, the last thing you want is a red alert, and a warning going off in your helmet, and that's what happened to me during a spacewalk. And it was kind of related to some of the problems we had. You may remember. There was a problem where the water got into the helmet of one of the crew members. It was a related type issue. But anyways, it was something that we kind of anticipated, and so when the alarm went off, I was able, the training we do, to handle emergencies is 90% of our training, and so when that happened, it was very quick for me to realize this is not something I have to worry about. It could change whether or not we're allowed to continue the spacewalk and how much time we're allowed to spend during the spacewalk. But really, it just was a matter of waiting for mission control to decide that it was okay to proceed. But that wasn't a good feeling, having an emergency alarm go off in a spacesuit. I hope we've had that happen a few times, but fortunately, we've had well over 1,000 hours of spacewalking time now, and no major disasters, which is really incredible.
That is really good and important too. Is it true that you grow taller in space? Did you get any taller? And if so, how long did that last?
Yeah, excuse me, you do get taller. You get about 2 inches taller. Some people get very excited about that. The short guys get really excited about that. But it goes away before anybody ever notices. When you come back to Earth, it's basically your spine. The compression in your spine kind of loosening out. And just checked my video here. I lost you for a second. There you are. So it's just a compression in your spine that kind of loosens up, and then when you come back to gravity, it immediately kind of compresses again, and you come right back to your normal height. So.
Okay, well, that's good to know that you go back to normal, but I guess sad, like you said, for the shorter people who want to be taller, that it's short-lived. And this next question is pretty important to me because I really enjoy eating, but has there ever been a food shortage in space?
Not that I'm aware of. The food is really good, by the way. It's not like, what people imagine. Now we have a lot of variety because we have all these different, with 16 different countries, sending people to space. We have a lot of variety of food now from different types of ethnic foods. So I actually miss a lot of food in space. Some of it was very good, but we always have at least a 6-month excess, quantity of food in space. So there's really never been. There's been a few times where we've had food on its way up that didn't make it because of a cargo vehicle not making it. But that never put us in a situation that we were really concerned. It's going to be much more important when you go to Mars. And you're trying to have enough food for a mission like that. That's why it's so important we learn how to grow our own food in space, and why it's important for us to figure out how to grow plants in space. And because as soon as we leave Earth, we don't have cargo vehicles that can come up and deliver food, in a short time. So that's one of the long-term challenges. It's also just a matter of carrying that much stuff. You could grow and recycle things, but to carry supplies, for such a long trip, for like 3 years or more, it's really, really difficult. So it's one of our challenges for the long term.
Absolutely, and costly as well to carry a bunch of cargo.
Yeah.
Well, that is all for the questions that we have. Do you have anything else that you would like to add?
Well, yeah, I just would like to say, I guess, to everybody, I was very lucky, I as a kid, this was my dream. I watched the Apollo program unfold as a kid and watched a lot of science fiction, and I always wanted to do this, but I was always embarrassed to tell people that I wanted to be an astronaut. It was kind of like being a fireman, kind of thing when you're a kid. And I'm very lucky, very lucky that I got to experience my dreams. And I just want to say to all you kids out there, that you guys have dreams. It doesn't matter whether it's to fly in space or any other career that you have in mind. You can do it too. If I could do it, you could do it. So, it requires, working hard. It means believing in yourself. It means having a passion for the things you do. Find out what you want, what you like, and do the things that you choose to do with a passion. And if you believe in yourself and work hard, hopefully your dreams can come true too. So I think that's my hope for you. Thank you for coming, and thanks for having me.
Well, thank you, former astronaut Dr. Greg Chamitoff, for sharing your time with us this evening. I know you're home with your family, so we really do appreciate you taking this time away to answer these questions and speak with us tonight. So thank you again, and have a good evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.